Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Leading us tonight is former Siena President Mike Cutler.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's begin. This town hall meeting is about one topic, the golf course situation. This is a lawful meeting of our HOA, and so once again, I will remind you that a willful disruption of this meeting is a Nevada misdemeanor criminal offense. The meeting is being videotaped and will be available on our website for those unable to be here tonight. We have as our speakers two people from whom we can learn a great deal. Commissioner Susan Breger and our land use attorney, Bob Gronauer. These people are both on our side, so there should be no arguing with them. Tom Warden from Howard Hughes Corporation could not make it tonight. Tom has been a friend of Siena for a long time, and still is. Many of you know him. He wishes us well tonight. For this town hall, we will let both our speakers tell us what they can, and then we will allow for questions from the audience to either speaker. We will bring a microphone to you. Please stand, state your name and address, and please be brief in asking your question. Remember, tonight we want to hear from the speakers, not from ourselves. That is where we are going. Let's keep this in mind. It is with great pleasure that I now welcome to our community tonight, our County Commissioner, Susan Breger.
Thank you so much. I know there's people in the other room, so we'll say hello to them too. I think they can see us. It's really important that as your leadership, and that's what I'll call them, that are on your community board, do hear from you, and that myself and Mr. Gronauer hear from you, because this is your community. I've been coming in here for 11 years as a commissioner, and since it was new as a real estate agent, so I know the community really well. And it's important to know that, do you want to keep it as the integrity that it is now? Do you want to see, as I share with you, what your options are? For me, once you get to that resolution of what you want to do, that's when I really can have a voice for you. So that's what's really important, is to let, I would say that Mr. Gronauer give you some information on the legal aspect of what he's done. I've done some homework with the DA and with the original intent of the land back in 1990, I want to say 8, something like that, before it became Siena. So you're in the beginning process and the steps of where you go, what you do, what do you commit to, what do you want to have it look like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, and how do you protect the integrity of the community? Because Siena is a very popular, well-designed, well-sought-after community, and I believe you can keep it that way. So knowing what you want gives me the ability to act on that and to protect you, and for Mr. Gronauer to know which path your leadership team will take so that we can give you that guidance and have an understanding. So when questions are asked, I think that helps. I like dialogue instead of just talking at people. So I will now give it back to you.
All right, first and foremost, the first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself. My name is Bob Gronauer, and I want to thank your board. I want to thank all of you and Commissioner Breger for allowing me to be here tonight to discuss some of your concerns with respect to the golf course. One of the first things that I want to do is give you a little bit of background, won't bore you too much, I've been doing zoning and land use and entitlement since 1996. This is going on my 21st year of representing thousands and thousands of developments down here in Southern Nevada. Our law firm has been very much in tune with development for longer than I've been practicing law here in Southern Nevada. We're familiar with and represented developers in Southern Highlands and Mountain's Edge, Providence, Rhodes Ranch, up in North Las Vegas, which is Aliante, Sky Canyon, Park Highlands, Tule Springs. So giving you a little bit of background is we're familiar, and I'm familiar with development in Southern Nevada, how master plan communities work. We've also have a lot of experience, probably one of the very few firms in Southern Nevada in dealing with golf course conversions, being on both sides of the coin with respect to those type of developments. So I don't think I know everything, but I think I have a pretty good idea to give you some direction and give you some background on some of the expectations, some of the issues that you're going to run into, and guide you down the path of how to address the situations and certain issues that you need to have addressed. So I've had a couple of, actually I haven't had a couple, I think I've had many conversations with the board members and your management company over the last several weeks with respect to getting prepared and doing the research, with respect to what do you have and what can you do and where can these things go. One of the questions that the board members asked me to at least address is, can you explain to everybody what are the early signs and what is the process for someone coming in to change the position of the golf course of what the golf course is today, where somebody's trying to come in and transition that to a different type of use? Well, first and foremost, this is where this process actually starts. As many of you know, if not all of you know, what we're dealing with today is you have the property owner who's come to the association and to the board and wants to have a discussion with respect to a potential subsidizing the golf course. Maybe there could be a potential discussion on development itself. The fact of the matter is, golf course communities, every golf course community, just about, I shouldn't say every, but many golf course communities in Southern Nevada are being targeted by investors, by residential developers to come in and develop on golf courses. That's a fact. This is no different of what you're dealing with here today. How else do you know these things happen? Because the potential developers that are here in Southern Nevada have those discussions, such as with board members, with HOAs, such as this. They go and they meet with the elected officials, such as Commissioner Brager or other elected officials throughout the valley. And they also sit down and meet with the planning development staff in this situation in Clark County. Sometimes they put the property up on the market itself. So those are telltale signs about what's happening in the community itself and on the golf course itself. So this is part of that process. Like it or not, the facts are the property owner is looking to do something with the golf course. When developers come to us, this is what they ask. They have 4 or 5 options. One of the options that they're talking about is subsidizing the golf course. The other options that they haven't talked to us about is probably talking to other developers about what and how they could develop this golf course and what their legal options are. So getting into the process itself, the second part of the question that I was asked, at least the answer before everybody, is the process. There are 2 types of processes that you're going to be dealing with. I'm going to call my left hand here to your right is going to be called the private side of a process that you got to go through. And on my right hand to your left side here is known as a public process. So in this master plan community here, you have 2 processes that a property owner has to deal with that owns a golf course here. First of all, for them to come through with any type of development on this side, they have to go through what the private development agreement has on the property that's recorded. There are CC&Rs that are recorded, there are certain restrictions. The bottom line is Howard Hughes and its affiliates have to approve a project plan on the property. If Howard Hughes does not approve that project plan or whatever they approve, a developer or property owner who wants to develop the golf course needs to get this column checked. Okay, this is the column over here that I said the private agreement side. The other side of the process is, and this is where your Commissioner Brager comes in Clark County. there is a zoning and land use process that I call the public process. That's a government process. In this process here, what a developer would have to do and or the property owner to come in for development, they would have to come in with what is known as a tentative map, which is to subdivide the property on the golf course itself. They would come in with a design review. The design review would be with respect to the guidelines of the houses, the sizes, heights of the houses, restrictions on buffering, and so on. And then also a little bit of a nuance, because you are in a master plan community, is there's something that's known as a development plan. And I can't speak 100% because I'd have to talk to the county a little bit more, but there's a development plan in this area for this village. And there was a certain amount of density, a certain amount of plans that were put into place when this was approved early on. But that development plan may have to be amended also for a potential developer or property owner to develop the golf course. So as I started out initially, on one side you go through the private check boxes, which is really dealing with the Howard Hughes, with the development plan and the agreements itself. And then on the other side is the government. And then as you go through the government itself, what you do is you check both boxes, then you're going to be able to develop the property. So that answers, trying to give you some short answers. I know this thing's very complex, and it's not as easy as a yes and a no. Because now as I just sat here, I just gave you the information of, we talked about what are the signs of having somebody come in to develop the golf course, and if somebody did, what is that process? One of the things I didn't mention about that process is, and I know Commissioner Brager, and I've worked with her for 12 years now, and I do a lot of development representing the development side, and the first thing that she's going to demand is to meet with the neighbors, whoever that developer is potentially coming in, or whatever the owner wants to do. And there's going to be a lot of neighborhood meetings, a lot of feedback going back and forth on what, if anything, can be done with that golf course as far as turning it into residential, turning it into some other buffering uses with some residential of a combo, whatever it is. I know this is going to be a long and lengthy process. And I know, and as I said, working with Commissioner Brager for the last 12 years, that I understand her style, where she's going to be involved in those neighborhood meetings, if those neighborhood meetings ever take effect, because of the process. Now, the next question that you're probably going to ask yourself when the board asks me to address is, what protections, if any, do we have here for our residential development? Simply put, I don't know if I can answer if you have certain protections, but I think what I can do is give you some facts of what we're dealing with here on this golf course. And I'm going to sum it up with my experience with the Badlands golf course, because I'm sure we've all heard what's going on over at the Badlands golf course. So let me start with this, is regardless that you see out there the golf course, we all believe that it's zoned for a golf course, and that's what it is. The fact of the matter is there is R2 zoning on that property on the golf course, and C2 zoning. For those who don't know what R2 and C2 zoning is, that is a zoning district that allows what that property can actually be developed as. In Clark County and in the development agreement here in this village in Sienna, R2 would allow up to 8 to 10 units an acre of property to be developed on the golf course in certain areas where it's zoned R2. Where the C2 zoning is typically where the clubhouse is, in this area that's located in here, is part of the C2 zoning. So the fact of the matter is, one of the things I need to point out to you, regardless whether or not you like the facts and the information I give, the property, if you look on the county website, you look at the documents itself, there is R2 zoning on that property. It's not zoned just for a golf course, there's zoning for potential residential. The other issue that you deal with, and this is dealt with the Badlands golf course, there is no deed restriction, and I'm sure you guys have checked your title reports, checked your documents itself. There are no deed restrictions that restrict the golf course strictly for the golf course itself that would prohibit residential development. There's also, we did further look in the title report from some of the facts of what you're dealing with is you do not have anything in your CC&Rs that would give you the power or the right to determine whether or not the golf course could change to residential. I know I'm dealing with Silverstone Golf Course. That's in those CC&Rs, and we're trying to change a golf course over there to residential for one of my builders, and we need 75% of the HOA to approve any type of residential development on that golf course out there. But that's a different situation, but over there, they did have some stuff in their CCNRs. Badlands on that one with Queensridge, there's nothing in those CCNRs that prohibit the golf course from changing to residential. The reason why I interject some of this from experience is because I want to explain to you some of these things that are happening to you is actually happening around on other golf courses, so you can see some similarities. Some of the other things that we've pointed out that we've talked to the board last week in some of our research is in your CCNRs, there's some loose language in there that states that you acknowledge that the golf course may not be here forever for the use. Again, I'm paraphrasing some of the language in here. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but through some of the documents that we've looked at, those documents do point out that there aren't any restrictions that requires this golf course to be used as a golf course 24/7 for the rest of our lives. However, on the other side of this, on some of the facts, as I mentioned earlier, the fact is they have to go through an approval process. If somebody's going to come in here from the private side, as I mentioned earlier, Howard Hughes is subject to, they have the power to approve all development here in Summerlin South. Okay, they're what is known as, they're the declarant, they're part of the Summerlin Council, they're the design review committee. The bottom line is, you have to, as a private developer, you cannot build anything without getting their approval. The second part of this equation of the facts that you're dealing with is, you're going through the county process. You're going to have to go through that process. There are conditions and there are issues that you want to look at. You want to look at access, you want to look at traffic, you want to look at the compatibility for potential residential. So there's a long list of things that one can look at or condition as you go through the zoning and land use process itself. And I know we talked also about it, there's an easement that benefits the golf course with some access easements to the golf course itself. There are some things in there you can look at to have some discussions with the golf course community itself. The last thing is, which I'm going to tie into the questions, I don't want to talk too long, because I'm sure there's a million questions that are out there, is the last thing that I was asked is what do we do? Okay, what do we do and how do you deal with this situation? And I talked to some of my partners about this, as I said earlier, as I talked to you about this, is have the experience and know the knowledge of what happens with a lot of the golf course communities here. And this may be information you may not want to hear, but this is the truth. About 2 years ago, the Queensridge Homeowners Association had attorneys. They spent a lot of money doing a lot of research. Those attorneys stood up in a room like this, and they promised those neighbors, they said, never will there ever be residential built on that golf course. That was their legal opinion. Okay, true story. Okay, and take this from the experience because we're, on the other side on this one. But I will tell you what that did in that meeting there. It emboldened the HOA, the neighbors, and they felt like they were going to win regardless. Now, a reminder that I told you, that property was zoned for residential, didn't have any deed restrictions on the property itself. 2 years later, okay, millions of dollars have been spent on our side defending the lawsuit. Millions and millions of dollars have been spent on the association and the neighbors fighting the lawsuit out there. There's been two separate court decisions out there. And basically what they've come down to say is that the property owner has a right to develop the golf course. Some residential can be there. So literally today, this afternoon, I know some of my partners are out there negotiating with the neighbors who've come to the table to negotiate something to get something done on that property. The reason why I share this story with you is I want to give you the background with respect to how some of these things go. And I told the board this, I'm a little bit uncomfortable standing up here because I know the one thing you want to hear from me is say, hey, let's fight this. I can guarantee you there's going to be no residential tomorrow. There could be other attorneys and law firms up here that can do this and say this, but listen, I've done this for 20 plus years. I know what the documents say. I have a pretty good idea of the pros and the cons here. That does not tell you that you don't have a position whatsoever. You have a county commissioner, you have documents in here that we can work together and get things done. The point that I want to make, and if I don't articulate it correctly, I apologize, is this is an opportunity where you got to look at all of your options, okay? There are many options that go down on the menu. And as I told the board, you as a community will vote on those options at some point in time. But from my experience in dealing with this, is saving the emotional distress, the hardship, the anguish that I've seen it happen over friends over there at the Queens Ridge for the last 2 years, knowing and understanding some of those issues and similarities. Sometimes you got to figure out what is best. And then I'm going to touch on 1 second. I know we talked about subsidizing the golf course. There's pros and cons subsidizing the golf course. What I can tell you in doing the research and knowing this, no agreement, no deed restriction or whatever that you can put out there. It's a business decision of the money, if you're willing to go down that down that path. There's no guarantee that that golf course stays there tomorrow. They can always go bankrupt, they can always go dark, and you invested that money in there. But it's a business decision. I'm touching on things fairly quickly because I know there's some issues that I've talked to the board on. And again, these are issues that you need to deal with. The good news is, I feel that this is more proactive in talking to your board. Your board, I think, has done a great job of asking the questions and having us do the research to make sure we're prepared to give you the facts. And at some point in time, as this goes down the road, to actually still have some more open dialogue and discussion to understand what your options are. And I think that's the key here as we go through this tonight, is understanding that there are options. There is no guarantee that residential is going to be out there, but I'm going to tell you one way or the other, there's going to be a battle, and probably the best way to do this is sit at the table and figure out the best way what those goals are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm sure there's millions of questions, all for Commissioner Brager and none for me. Thank you.
We are ready for questions. Please raise your hand.
Hello? Ian Decker, 10582, Van Bola, please. What restrictions, if any, exist in our CCNRs to take our money to subsidize an outside profit-making organization?
Actually, I'll take that question. We are doing some research on that, on the assessments itself, because actually I think that was a question that was asked at the open meeting, I think last week. So we have our real estate guys taking a look into that, and with respect, if you're looking to go down the assessment route, so we'll be able to give you that answer. It's not as easy cut and dry if you can or can't. So we want to make sure we research the answer and give you that information back. But that's something that we're doing research on today.
I'm Jerry Springer, 504 Ravidro. I wonder what the $12.50 per person will go for. Will it, if we do decide to do that, will there be any limit on what the owner of the golf course will have?
Yeah, I'm going to just stand up because I have a feeling I'm going to be targeted with many of the questions, or I'll volunteer those, okay, to answer. So first of all, I think through the conversations, these are just negotiations from my understanding. Personally, well, first of all, I've not spoken to the property owner or any representatives of the property itself. My understanding through the board, there's some discussions with respect to how much they would be looking to subsidize the property. I don't think as far as what is that exact amount has been determined. I think generally speaking, and talking to the board, is I think that is just a first off general conversation. And again, just because somebody throws out $12.50 does not mean that that's the final number or whatever that's supposed to cover. But those are things that you have to do due diligence on to understand what is the exact concern of the cost to do the upkeep for the maintenance of the golf course or whatever that money is supposed to be deferred to.
Good evening. My name is Tony Mountain. I live at 5083 Pensier Street. My question actually is for the commissioner. If we're going down the public process, as the developer might, would it require an environmental impact study? And if that's the case, is that something that they can do quietly without our being aware of it? Or would it have to come through the county to get that done? So that's another sign that we know something's happening.
If it were to go to the public part, it would be well after your decision, meaning, do you want it to go to houses? Do you want to just not do the 1250? Do you not want some of the things that they are, sharing with the board that the board will be sharing with you? If that happens, there's from flood studies to environmental studies to what builders come in. I feel like I have a great relationship. Now I have a little under 2 years left, so if anything, I'll get on the other side of it with the whatever commissioner's there, because I will know a lot about it at that point in time. But there's a lot that takes place, as Mr. Gronauer shared. So when it gets to my side, the things that just so you know, the things that I asked the DA, does it stay 55 and older? He's telling me absolutely yes, and he did say that very strongly. Does the R2 that Bob spoke about, what can I do and how much can we limit it? He thinks 5 or 6 per acre. So there's a lot of things that a developer is usually very willing to work with. They don't want to come into a community and just ravage it and make it difficult for what you do in the future and the values of your home. So all those studies do take place.
Hello, Mike Cutler, 4680 Denaro. Commissioner, welcome. I guess my only question is about, unless the Dr. Lee files for bankruptcy, can he allow that golf course to go dry? Does he have to maintain it while we're in negotiations? Because that may give him an opportunity to pressure us by, look, your golf course is dying unless you kind of meet us and speed up the negotiations. At the same time, I hope this process goes quickly because Commissioner Brager is in our corner, and that's who we want in our corner.
Yeah, I'll take that question. The process itself, Commissioner Brager would be a part of that process. That's obviously what you want. With respect to the negotiation tactics, that is not something that would look favorable on the owner of the golf course. There are certain requirements that he needs to maintain per the easement maintenance agreement for the ponds and the fountains or what we have in the amenities. So I don't think it would be looked on so favorably. There's other actions that you can deal with Summerlin and the county itself to make sure it's in compliance. So we've started looking into that. So there's 3 or 4 avenues to fire back, so to speak, and address those issues if somebody wants to play those games. And it's probably not in the best interest if they're trying to win our favor, or I say our favor, the group, us, all of us, to support something.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Schultz, 10340 Riva de Destino. I have really 2 questions. One about the easements that exist in our CC&Rs.
Good job, David.
All right. This is a burden to stand up. Anyway, my question is, would you expect that if this thing got contentious, that they would argue that they could expand their easements to include access to our community? Because it's very limited access that they have. Or would that be considered overburdening the easement? Or would that be something that would have to be at issue in court?
Actually, that's a very good question, and we discussed that earlier today and over the weekend on that. There's access easements that you have between the golf course and the community itself. That is a part of what we look at as some leverage that we do have. However, in the court of law, they would definitely go litigate that if we try to shut down the access points because of the easement agreement that we have, and they would go and ask the court to give them an easement of necessity. And there you go, you start spending money, time, and effort fighting that issue when you have this other issue over there. But that is something that we have looked at with respect to what avenues do you have on the access easement itself.
My question was, if you try to expand the easement to include vehicular traffic on our streets. Would that, in your opinion, constitute overburdening the existing easement?
Yeah, that's our position, yes. That's what the position would take with respect to the current easement, because the easement right now is to service the golf course and not to service additional residential traffic.
But you'd see that as being an issue if
That would be an issue, yes.
Yeah, and last thing is, do you think that, from your experience, that deed restrictions can be negotiated in situations like this if we were to provide some compensation to the golf course?
Yes, and what I'll mention with respect to the deed restriction, I think if you're looking for any type of assessment to subsidize the golf course, obviously if on your side what you want to negotiate, what we want to negotiate is for some type of deed restriction. The one thing that I wanted is, I don't know if I was clear earlier, the problem with the deed restriction, and I'm going to tell you how some of these deals work. You cut the deal and you get this deed restriction in place, and you get the assessment in place, you get the commitment. That doesn't mean a year or 2 years later or 6 months later they can come back and try to renegotiate the deed again. And I'm playing devil's advocate, that's what we do for a living, but I wanted to at least give you that as you figure out the business decisions that you're going to have to make in the upcoming weeks and months as you deal with this issue.
Would our two guests tonight please stand when you answer our questions? Thank you.
Good evening. My name's John Kennedy. I'm at 10257 Strada, La Arena Court. I wondered if anybody would have an idea up on the panel how the land values and home values have been affected in the Badlands situation. And if, I think the commissioner mentioned she was a realtor, maybe she studied that a little bit, so maybe you could share that with us?
I am standing if you can. I might need the chair. That's a really great question. What I think happened, and this is I've been doing real estate 27 years. So professionally, because of what Mr. Gronauer said in that 2-year factor where they didn't know what they were going to do, what was going to happen, what was going on, that created a little bit of a scenario over there. And so the houses, they're on the market, they did sell, they took a little bit longer, and they still are getting good value for their homes. They are disclosing what's happening, even though they don't have a total conclusion. So the faster you have a conclusion and people know what's happening, the better it is for the value of your homes. And I don't believe if they were to build homes, things that sometimes I ask builders when another builder is coming into a development that failed, yours hasn't failed, but there has been that situation. I get kind of nosy and I'm very bold, like what's the price point going to be? How does it affect them? There's single stories here. Are you maintaining single stories? I feel like I have a lot of leverage when it comes to when if there is a final decision on if it goes to the housing component versus you pay the $150 or the $1,250 a month per household. But I believe that you will stabilize very quickly and that people will still love it inside of here in Siena.